Yo, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another video, and today we're doing something a little bit different. The Cycle Frontiers first season is winding down a little bit, so on the Twitch channel we've decided to pick up a little bit of Path of Exile to pass the time until Season 2 launches. And a lot of people in the community have actually joined us in checking out the game, but I've been getting a lot of questions about how difficult the game is to get into, and how difficult it is to get started with it, and how little hand-holding the game actually does, which is why I decided, you know what, I'll just make a YouTube guide about how to get started as a new player in Path of Exile. So let's dive into that. Now, who the F am I to explain you anything about Path of Exile? Well, I have been playing this game since 2013 on and off. I haven't played all the leagues since then, but I played a good amount of them, and I have a reasonable amount of hours invested into this game. I've also built up a knowledge base that should at least be enough to get some people started with this game, and you know, instead of just having to dive in completely blind, give you guys a little bit of guidance and a little bit of tips that can make your first playthrough feel a lot better. Now, this guide will only be focusing on playing through the first 10 acts, aka the story mode of the game. That is all we're focusing on in this video, because trust me, that will already be enough information to give to you guys in one go. Alright, now you've probably ended up in this video because you went into the game, you ran across Twilight Strand for the first time, you beat Hillock, at least I hope so, and you got your very first skill point, and then it happens. You opened up the skill tree, you saw it in all of its immense glory, and you can't remember what happened next because you fainted in anxious overwhelmedness. Sounds about right? And that's why this guide is not going to start at step 1, getting started with Path of Exile. We're going to start at step 0, aka preparation. A good thing to do before you start playing Path of Exile is get a good idea of the style of build you want to play. Are you the type of person that wants to play a melee build? Do you want to play a bow build? Do you want to play a caster build? Do you want to play a minion build? Any of the archetypes, any of the standard archetypes that you can think of that are available in ARPGs are also available in Path of Exile. So get yourself a rough idea of what you want to start with, and then, and this is, I can't stress this enough, do some research before and find a good build guide for your first playthrough. Now I know what you guys are already thinking. You're thinking, no, this is an ARPG, I want to make my own build, and I want to crush stuff, and I can do this. No, you can't. Path of Exile has far too many layers and has far too much knowledge to digest before you're gonna be able to make your own build. So do yourself a favor and let your first experience in the game be a guided one. Have a build backing you up, because the problem is a lot of people will come in from other ARPGs and they'll be only focused on building damage, because that's basically how other ARPGs work. Let's go with the main competitor, aka Diablo 3. What do you do in Diablo 3? You don't ever look at your defenses and you only go for damage. That's the only stats you're looking for. That is something that you cannot afford in Path of Exile, because any basic mob will eventually look at you and you'll fall over and die. So while I know that a lot of people play these games to make cool builds and stuff, trust me, your first playthrough, you want to be handheld. And then later on, once you understand the game, once you understand how the game works and how the end game works as well, that's when you'll understand, okay, I need to balance my defenses with my offenses, and I need to make sure that I have a couple of defensive layers, etc., etc. And then you'll be able to make a build. So trust me, you'll have plenty of time to have a lot of fun with that. But for your first playthrough, do yourself a favor, pick a build and follow the guide. And to make that all of the more easy, there is going to be a link down below the video that will take you to the download of Path of Building, which is a third-party software which will help you with making your builds and actually also following your guides, because there are a lot of super helpful content creators on the internet making great, amazing guides for Path of Exile. And what they do is they have a file for you that you can upload into that Path of Building program that I'm showing you on the screen right now. And you'll just be able to just follow along all of the steps that you need to take to follow your build while you're playing. One of the content creators that I would highly recommend you check out, because he basically has builds for everything that you might want to play, is Zizaran. He's got great build guides. His path of buildings are very detailed and very beginner friendly, so definitely check out his channel. I will have his link below as well. My current character that I'm playing in the Calendar League right now is also one of Scissorin's guides because I've been out of the game for about a year and a half, so I needed to catch up a little bit and I wasn't able to make my own build, or, you know, I wasn't really ready to take the risk of making my own build. Alright, so now that we know what kind of build we're going to be playing, it's time to get started. Now first off, what league should you play? I would strongly recommend making your first character in the Challenge League, the normal one, the Trade League. Reason for it is, it's normal mode, you can die and just continue on playing, you'll be able to trade with other players to get pieces of gear or other things that you might need, and all around it is, let's say, the baseline Path of Exile experience. The other options available are the normal solo self-found, which means that you cannot trade with anyone and you're fully self-sufficient. You need to craft or find your own gear basically and do all of your progression all on your own. And then you can also go into the hardcore mode of the game. Now the hardcore mode of the game basically has permadeath. When your character dies, it is removed from the league, it goes to standard league, and the items on it are also lost to standard league. Your stash, however, is persistent, so if you make a new character in that league, you will still have everything that is in your stash, you'll have that available to you, and you can continue on playing, and also your progression through the game, which is mainly referring to the end game, is also saved. But if the character dies, it's gone. And then there's also the hardcore solo self-found variant, which is the same. It also has the permadeath rule, but again, you're making all of your stuff yourself or finding all of your stuff yourself and doing all of your progressing alone. Now, technically, there's two more leagues available, which is the regular, standard, and hardcore mode, but I wouldn't recommend playing those. Those are persistent leagues that will just keep on going, while the challenge leagues, they only last for about 3 to 4 months depending on the development cycle of the game. The parent leagues don't have the newest game mechanics in them just yet. So for example, right now in Lake of Calandra, we have the lake mechanic where we make tablets and we can kind of build our own content and then run it later on. That is not available in standard right now or in regular hardcore, which is why I honestly wouldn't recommend getting started there. There's more reasons than that, but just trust me, just go with the standard Challenge League. Alright, now that we're rolling and we're playing through the game, now let's talk a little bit about step 3, playing through the story. Path of Exile is split up into 10 different story acts, all with their own part of the story and all with their own progression. All of them will have a town area where you'll have some NPCs where you can buy some stuff and do some trading. And this is also the place where you will pick up and turn in your quests. At the very start, you will be waking up on Twilight Strand naked and afraid, but luckily there's a weapon lying right next to you, and very soon you'll find your first skill gem. Now, at that point, the game will show you a button that says skip all tutorials, and please, for the love of Cthulhu, do not press this button. Trust me, this is a game where you're going to be wanting to read tutorials, or it's going to be very hard and you're going to be scratching your head a lot of the time. And usually what happens with people that click on the skip all tutorials button, you can see in a little funny video that I made that I'll link up right here. Now, the way that Path of Exile skill system actually works is that you will be slotting skill gems into the slots that you have available on your gear. If you look at every gear piece, most of them, except for jewelry and belts, will have sockets available in them. Some of those sockets might be linked, which will be indicated by a little golden bar between them. Linked sockets means that you can put a skill gem in there, and then you can put a supporting gem on there, which will increase the power of the original skill gem, if of course you're putting in the right skill gems and the right support gems. You basically want as many links as possible for your main skill, for your big attack, let's say, and then you'll also be using your other gear pieces with slots on them to provide some additional supportive skills, etc, etc. Once you put a skill gem into a socket on a gear piece that you are wearing, the skill will become available in your action bar down below, and you'll be able to put it on any of the buttons that you would like. Now, of course, by progressing through the story, killing monsters, and completing quests, etc, etc, you will be gathering experience, which will eventually lead you to leveling up. Every time you level up, you will get 1 skill point that you will be able to invest into the skill tree. Now, make sure to follow the guide that we have picked out earlier to allocate that point adequately. Now, on your first playthrough, I would also recommend that you do all of the quests that you see. You'll have a handy little bar on the side, on the right side of your screen, that will tell you what quests that you need to do, but also in town, you will see the classic NPC with a big mark above their head, and just click on them, they'll explain you what to do, and then you can go into the maps and do the quests. For your first playthrough, I would just do all of them because it will help you explore the maps and get to know where everything is. The bonus here is exploring the maps and getting to know the layout of the maps a little bit, and getting to know the layout of the acts a little bit is going to be a bonus down the line, because this is the kind of game, if you end up liking it, you will be leveling quite a couple characters over time. So it's nice to have a good idea of the layouts and just be able to speed on through later on when you're doing your next characters. And now this is where I want to take a moment to talk about one little thing, and that is the importance of playing at your own pace. If you're gonna go looking on YouTube for leveling guides for this game, a lot of the time you will end up in guides that are all about speed and minimizing the time spent in the story. Those guides are all made for people who want to optimize the leveling process because they've been playing for a while and they just want to try out more builds, but you don't have to do this for your first playthrough. Take it slow, enjoy your playthrough, and just get to know the game. In Path of Exile, you can basically see the first 10 acts as a long stretched out tutorial, and the real game starts once you get into the end game. Just take your time to get to know the game, play at your own pace, otherwise you're going to get overwhelmed, and it would be a shame to miss out on the rest of PoE just because you tried to rush the early game. You'll hear people brag about doing the story in 4 hours or less, but it is perfectly okay for you to take 20 to 25 hours or even more on your first time through. The main goal still is, you're playing a video game, you're supposed to be having fun. Alright, now let's talk a little bit more about gear, loot, items, and stuff that you want to pick up while you're playing through the story. As a general rule of thumb, pick up every single currency item. Those are those orb items such as Orb of Transmutation, Orb of Augmentation, Orb of Fusing, etc, etc. These have two applications in the game. They can either be used for crafting, or they can be used as a currency for trading with other players or NPCs, so make sure you pick up all of them. A big help with looting can be setting up a loot filter, but for the sake of not overwhelming you, I'm not going to go into that on this video. If you want more info about loot filters, let me know in the comments down below and I can provide another video for that as well. Now, if at certain points you need certain orbs but you haven't found them on the ground just yet, take a look at the vendors in town, as they will also exchange some of the orbs for others. Also, try to pick up every wisdom and portal scroll, as they will also be important. The portal scroll will allow you to make a portal back to town whenever you want to, and the wisdom scroll will be needed to identify items. In terms of gearing throughout the story, the best way to go about it is to really only pick up every rare or yellow item that you find and identify it. And if it has at least some life on it and some resistances, slap it on. This is going to be your main mantra while leveling through the game: life and resistances on all of your gear pieces, with the exception of your weapon, because on your weapon you are going to want to have damage modifiers. This also brings me to the most important thing in the leveling process. Always try to keep your resistances capped, which means try to get them at 75%. What resistances am I talking about, you ask? If you tap the C button, that will pull up your character sheet, and in the defenses tab you will see 3 elemental resistances for fire, cold, and lightning. Always try to aim at having these capped at 75%, because they will be doing a lot of damage reduction for you. The other thing you want to do throughout the story is trying to get your life pool as high as possible. So try to find as many pieces, or try wearing as many pieces as you can that have plus X amount of life on them. Also, try to pick up every rare weapon that you can use and check whether it's an upgrade to your previous one. The guide you're following will probably also have some directions on what to look for. Don't worry too much just yet about chaos resistance, as chaos damage is not very prevalent in the story, but it will become more important once we get into the endgame. Unlike other ARPGs, defenses are super important in Path of Exile, and you really can't afford to skimp on them. Now, let's talk a little bit about flasks, because flasks are a very unique thing about Path of Exile, and also a very important part of the gameplay, and also a very powerful part of the gameplay. So, step 5, using flasks. Now, during the story, what I usually do is I try to run at least 2 life flasks, which are the highest ones that I can find at any given time, 1 quicksilver flask for some extra movement, and 1 mana flask. And then the last flask slot, I usually tend to go with either another life flask, or if I'm lucky enough to find another quicksilver flask, I'll run a quicksilver flask. You don't really need to spend too much time trying to craft your flasks during the story. However, there are a couple of modifiers that will make your life a little bit easier, so let's talk about them for a second. So what you can do is you can use the orbs that you find, such as the Orb of Transmutation and the Orb of Alteration. You can use these two to craft your flasks a little bit. You can make them from a regular white flask into a blue magic flask, and it will have certain properties. One of the properties that can be really helpful during leveling is having seething on one of your life flasks, because seething basically makes it so that instead of healing over time, you will be able to instantly heal back a chunk of HP, which is going to be important if you need to counter burst damage. Having one of those will definitely save your life many times over. It's basically your panic button. And then the only other mod that really matters during the story is probably going to be the mod that makes you immune to bleeding. I believe it's called Sealing right now. And what it will do is it will, when you're bleeding, it will stop the bleed and make you immune to other bleed effects for a little while. This can be pretty important because in Act 4, once you get to Act 4, it's important to try and have one of these, because that's when mobs will be introduced that will put a bleed on you. And the thing with a bleed is, once it's on you, if you start running and you start running really fast, that will be speeding up the way that the bleed will be killing you. So it's a really insidious and really annoying killer. So it's definitely a good idea to try to have one of your flasks with a sealing modifier on there. Now there's plenty more that can be said about flasks in Path of Exile, as they are an integral and very important and very powerful part of the gameplay in Path of Exile, but that can be an entire guide on its own. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know. But for the sake of keeping this guide easy to digest, we're not going to go too deep into it. I will say throughout your playthrough, you will probably find a bunch of different utility flasks, all with doing different things. Some of them will provide you with some extra resistances, others will give you an offensive bonus. I basically want to invite you to try around with them. Just as long as you have 2 life flasks and a mana flask ready to keep everything flowing, just try out the other flasks as you please. And then there's one final thing that we need to talk about in this guide during the story playthrough, and that is the lab. So this is basically step 6, the lab trials, and ascending your character. While playing through the story, you will occasionally come across closed off areas in a map called a Trial of Ascension. I recommend that you do them the moment that you find them, because when you have done enough of them, this will unlock the option to do the labyrinth, aka the lab, in Act 3. This is how your character will achieve ascension, or continue growing in its ascension, which is basically the option to choose one of the 3 subclasses for your class. It is a further specialization in a certain build direction, and the passives that you get here are extremely powerful. They are many times more powerful than the regular skill points on the talent tree, so it is very important that you try to do your lab as soon as possible, as you will definitely feel a nice power spike. Try to aim at doing them at the suggested levels, which will be 33 for normal lab, 55 for cruel lab, and 68 for merciless lab. For the normal level lab, you will have to complete 6 trials, which you will find in the 3 acts before them. Then you will have to complete 3 more additional ones to do the cruel lab, and then another 3 for the merciless lab. The Eternal Labyrinth is linked to the endgame, but it is the same thing, just scaled up to a higher level again and needing a specific item to be able to enter it. Now it's very important to realize that the lab, unlike the rest of the game, has a permadeath rule. If you're playing in the normal story and you die, you're just going to be able to respawn either in town or at your last checkpoint, but if you die in the lab, the only thing you can do is start it all over from the start again. So play your first labs, play them slow, look around, be careful, and just, try to progress them slowly but safely. Now what you're going to do in this lab is you will progress through a series of rooms that will contain traps and monsters for you to safely try and navigate through until you reach something called the Aspirant's Trial. This is where you will fight the lab boss called Izaro, which you will do 3 times. After the final room and killing Izaro, you will unlock the loot room behind where you will find an altar where you can ascend to the class of your choice and pick your first 2 ascension points. Like I said earlier, this is a big damage boost for most classes and usually where a lot of builds start picking up some punching power. Like I already said, for your first couple of goes, try to play the lab reasonably slow and be careful about the traps because they can be very deadly very quickly. Dying in the lab can be very frustrating, but trust me, it is worth it, so stick with it, keep trying, and you'll get there. And there you have it. Pretty lengthy guide, but it does cover pretty much everything that you need to know to make your first playthrough of the first 10 acts of Path of Exile a lot easier and hopefully a lot more fun. Now, along the way, you will also be introduced to a bunch of endgame mechanics which you will meet for the first time throughout the story, but it's very easy to just follow the quests as they are presented to you, and they will explain to you how the mechanics work as well. So make sure to pick those up and make sure that you try to get an idea of what they do as well. Now, there are plenty more things that we can talk about in this game, so if you want to see me make more guides for this game, let me know in the comments down below, and make sure that you subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video, and turn on your notifications so you know when the next video goes live. If you have any questions, feel free to throw those in the comments, as well as I try to keep up with them as well as I can, but you can also just visit us over on Twitch and ask your questions over there, as I will be playing some more Path of Exile over the next couple of weeks. That's going to be it for me today. Catch you in the next one, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.